The night breathed in color. Neon lights cut through the darkness like electric veins, pulsing in rhythm with the thunder of bass that rolled across the open field. Thousands of bodies moved as one, jumping, swaying, shouting, each heartbeat, syncing with the music that refused to slow down. The air was thick with heat, dust, and anticipation. This was freedom. This was escape. For a few hours, nothing else in the world existed. At the edge of it all, standing just far enough from the center to remain unnoticed, was Keanu Reeves. No entourage, no security, no spotlight chasing him. Just a plain black shirt, worn boots, and a quiet presence that blended seamlessly into the crowd. People brushed past him without a second glance, too consumed by flashing lights and pounding music to recognize the man who had spent decades on screens around the world. But Keanu wasn't watching the stage. He was watching the people. There was something raw here, something unfiltered. Laughter that wasn't rehearsed, joy that didn't come from scripts or cameras. For a moment, he allowed himself to just exist in it, to feel it, to remember what it was like to be part of something simple. Not far from him, near a smaller stage, a young woman clutched a microphone with trembling hands. Her name was Alina, though no one in the crowd knew it yet. To them, she was just another opening act, another voice before the real performers came on. But to her, this moment was everything. Months of rejection emails, nights spent singing in empty cafes, voices telling her she wasn't good enough. It had all led here. She closed her eyes for a second, inhaling sharply as the crowd buzzed with impatience. "Who even is she?" someone muttered nearby. "Just start already," another voice complained. Alina swallowed hard, stepping forward into the lights. The brightness blinded her for a split second, but she forced herself to sing. Her voice was soft at first, almost swallowed by the noise. But there was something in it. Something real, something fragile. Keanu turned his head slightly, catching that sound, and he listened. A few meters away, tension of a different kind was building. Rashid adjusted his security vest for what felt like the 100th time that night. Sweat clung to his forehead as he scanned the crowd, his eyes darting from one cluster of people to another. He had worked events before, but nothing like this. The sheer number of attendees was overwhelming. "Keep the front line clear," someone shouted through his earpiece. He tried. He really did. But people kept pushing forward, squeezing into spaces that didn't exist. Every time he created a gap, it closed again within seconds. "Back up, please. Everyone just take a step back," he yelled, his voice nearly drowned out by the music. No one listened. Further into the crowd, a group of young men shoved their way closer to the stage, laughing too loudly, their energy tipping from excitement into something sharper. One of them bumped into a girl, spilling her drink. "Watch it," she snapped. "Relax, it's a festival," he shot back, smirking. A small argument sparked, nothing major, just a flicker, but it didn't disappear. It lingered, hanging in the air like static before a storm. Back near the stage, Alina's voice grew stronger. She pushed through the noise, pouring everything she had into each note. For a few fleeting seconds, a handful of people actually stopped to listen. Keanu was one of them. There was a quiet intensity in his gaze, as if he understood exactly what it meant to stand there, exposed and vulnerable, hoping someone, anyone, would care. But around them, the energy was shifting. The crowd pressed tighter, the laughter grew louder but less joyful. Somewhere, a shout rose above the music, sharp, irritated. Then another. Rashid noticed it first, the subtle change. The way movement became less fluid, more forced. People weren't just dancing anymore, they were pushing. For space, for air, for a better view. "Hey, stop pushing," someone yelled. "I can't move," another voice cried out. For a brief moment, the music seemed too loud, too overwhelming, as if it was fueling something it couldn't control. Keanu's expression changed, just slightly. He took a step forward, his eyes scanning the crowd more carefully now. The joy was still there, but it was cracking. Beneath it, something uneasy stirred, something fragile, something that felt like it could break at any second. And as the lights flashed brighter and the bass dropped harder, almost no one realized how close they were to losing control. The music didn't stop, but something underneath it shifted. It was subtle at first, like a change in air pressure before a storm. The rhythm still pounded through the speakers, lights still exploded in waves of color, and the crowd still moved, but no longer as one. The flow had fractured. What had once felt like shared energy now felt like collision. Keanu Reeves felt it immediately. He stepped forward again, slower this time, his eyes narrowing as he studied the movement around him. People weren't just dancing, they were bracing. Shoulders tightened, elbows came up. Faces that had been glowing with excitement now carried flickers of irritation, even fear. A sharp shove rippled through the crowd to his left. "Back off!" someone snapped. "I'm not even pushing," came the reply, louder, defensive. But it didn't matter who started it. The tension spread faster than logic. Near the barricade, Rashid's situation was slipping. "Step back!" "Please, everyone step back!" he shouted again, his voice cracking under pressure. His hands pressed against the metal barrier as the crowd surged forward, bodies compressing against it in uneven waves. His earpiece crackled. "We're getting reports of overcrowding near the center. Hold your position." Hold your position? Rashid clenched his jaw. There was no position to hold anymore. The line between control and chaos was thinning with every second. He scanned the sea of faces, too many, too close, too loud. Then he saw it. A girl, barely visible, trying to squeeze her way sideways through the mass of people. Her movements were frantic, her head turning left and right, as if searching for someone. She wasn't dancing. She was trying to escape. Rashid took a step, forward instinctively, but another surge slammed into the barrier, forcing him back. "Damn it!" On stage, Alina pushed through her final verse, her voice rising with everything she had left. For a brief moment, it cut through the noise again, clear, emotional, raw. But the crowd wasn't listening anymore. Not really. A chant started somewhere deeper in the mass, not for her, not even for the music. Just noise, just pressure. People, shouting over each other, trying to be heard, trying to exist in a space that was shrinking by the second. Alina's eyes flickered open. Something felt wrong. She couldn't explain it, but she could feel it in the way the crowd moved. Not like waves anymore, but like something crashing into itself. Her voice faltered for half a beat before she caught it again, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Come on," she whispered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. In the crowd, Keanu had stopped moving. He stood still now, completely still, his focus locked on the shifting patterns around him. He wasn't looking at individuals anymore. He was watching the whole. The pressure points, the weak spots, the places where things were starting to break. Another shove, harder this time. Someone stumbled. A drink flew into the air, splashing across faces already slick with sweat. The reaction was instant. Anger, confusion, more pushing. "Watch it! You spilled on me! It wasn't me!" The argument flared, voices rising, bodies turning, space tightening even further. And then, a scream. Not loud enough to stop the music, but sharp enough to cut through everything nearby. Keanu's head snapped toward the sound. For a split second, time seemed to slow. A young girl, no older than 12, was caught between two waves of people moving in opposite directions. Her small frame struggled against the force, her hands reaching out, grasping at nothing. "Mom!" she cried, her voice trembling, barely audible beneath the chaos. No one heard her, or if they did, they couldn't help. The crowd surged again. Keanu moved. Not fast, not reckless, but deliberate. Every step calculated as he pushed forward, slipping between bodies, using just enough force to create space without adding to the panic. Easy, he muttered quietly, more to the moment than to anyone specific. Easy. But the crowd didn't know easy anymore. Behind him, Rashid saw the shift escalate. "We've got a problem," he shouted into his radio. "It's building, center left side, near the second stage," Static answered him. Then, "Units are on the way." It wouldn't be fast enough. Back on stage, Alina reached the end of her song. The final note hung in the air, fragile, trembling, and disappeared into noise. For a second, there was no applause. Just movement. Too much movement. Her chest tightened as she looked out into the crowd, the realization creeping in like a cold wave. This wasn't just excitement anymore. Something was breaking. And in the middle of it all, unnoticed by thousands, Keanu kept moving forward, toward the girl, toward the pressure, toward the exact place where everything was about to fall apart. The breaking point didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments. A stumble here, a shout there, a ripple that didn't settle the way it should have. And then, everything tipped. The music cut out. Not gradually, not with warning, but suddenly, like a wire had been ripped from its source. The heavy bass that had been driving the night vanished, leaving behind a hollow, ringing silence that lasted less than a second. Then the screaming began. At first, it was scattered, confused. People calling out to friends, asking what happened. But confusion doesn't stay quiet for long in a crowd this dense. It mutates. Someone fell. No one could see it clearly, but the effect spread instantly. The people closest tried to move away, pushing back against those behind them who had no idea why the motion had changed. Pressure built from both sides, compressing bodies into an unforgiving wall of panic. "I can't breathe. Move back. Stop pushing." But no one was in control anymore. The crowd surged like a living thing, blind, reactive, unstoppable. In the chaos, the young girl was swallowed further. Her small hands clawed at jackets, sleeves, anything she could grab, but every grip slipped away as people twisted and shoved around her. Her voice cracked as she screamed for her mother again, but it dissolved into the roar of fear. A shoulder slammed into her, then another. Her feet barely touched the ground. Just a few meters away, Keanu Reeves saw it happen. This time, he didn't hesitate. He pushed forward harder now, angling his body sideways to cut through the mass. Every movement was controlled, purposeful, not fighting the crowd but working through it. He placed a steady hand on one man's shoulder, guiding him back just enough to create space. He slipped past another, turning his frame to absorb impact without losing balance. "Hey, easy," he said, calm but firm. "There's room, just slow down." Most people didn't even register his words, but a few did, and a few was enough to start a shift, small, fragile, but real. Still, the panic was spreading faster. Near the barricade, Rashid felt the full force of it hit. The metal railing groaned under pressure as bodies slammed into it. He grabbed it with both hands, bracing himself as he tried to hold the line. "Back up! Back up now!" he yelled, desperation cutting through his voice. A man in front of him turned, eyes wide with fear. "We can't! There's too many people!" Another surge hit, harder this time. The barrier buckled slightly. Rashid's heart dropped. "Control, we need immediate support." He barked into his radio. "This is turning into a crush!" No response, just static. Back near the stage, Alina stood frozen. The sudden silence of the music had disoriented her, but the screams snapped her back. She stepped forward instinctively. peering into the sea of chaos that had replaced her audience. "What's happening?" she whispered, her voice shaking. A stagehand rushed past her, shouting something about shutting everything down, clearing the area, but the words barely registered. All she could see were faces, panicked, desperate. And then she saw someone fall. Her breath caught. The image burned into her mind, the way the person disappeared almost instantly beneath shifting bodies. "No," she murmured, taking a step back. Out in the crowd, Keanu finally reached the girl. She was barely visible now, her head ducked, arms raised weakly as she tried to protect herself. "Hey," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "I've got you." She didn't respond at first, too overwhelmed, too frightened, but when his hands reached her shoulders, firm and grounding, she froze. For a split second, everything around her blurred. "You're okay," he continued, lowering himself, slightly to meet her level. "Stay with me." He positioned himself between her and the direction of the strongest pressure, using his body as a shield. One arm wrapped protectively around her, anchoring her in place while his other hand pushed, gently but firmly against the crowd. "Give us space," he called out, not shouting but projecting just enough to be heard by those closest. "There's a child here." A man nearby turned, confusion on his face, then understanding. "Hey, there's a kid! Move back!" He shouted, passing it on. The message spread unevenly, but it moved. A pocket of space opened, small, fragile, but enough. Keanu took it. "Come on," he said softly to the girl, guiding her step by step. "We're getting out of here." Behind them, the chaos intensified. More people were shouting now, the realization of danger spreading like wildfire. Without music to anchor them, every sound felt louder, sharper, fear feeding on itself. Rashid saw the shift ripple outward and felt something in his chest tighten. This was it. This was the moment everything either collapsed or changed. And in the middle of it all, moving against the tide instead of with it, Keanu led the girl forward, one step at a time, toward a sliver of safety that might not hold for long. Part 4. The air had changed. It wasn't just noise anymore, it was pressure. Heavy, suffocating, pressing in from every direction like the night itself was closing around them. The screams had multiplied, layered over each other until they blurred into something almost constant, almost unbearable. And yet, in the middle of it all, Keanu Reeves moved with a kind of quiet clarity. He didn't rush blindly. He didn't panic. He adjusted. Every step forward was calculated, angled to reduce resistance, timed with the shifting motion of the crowd. He kept one arm firmly around the young girl, holding her close enough that she wouldn't be lost again, but not so tightly that she couldn't breathe. "Stay right here," he murmured, his voice low but steady near her ear. "Don't let go." Her fingers clutched his shirt like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Around them, people were still pushing, but now something else had begun to seep in. Awareness. A man stumbled into Keanu's shoulder, nearly knocking him off balance. He turned, ready to snap. But then he saw the girl, saw her fear, saw the way Keanu shielded her. The anger drained from his face. "Hey, hold up!" the man shouted, turning to those behind him. "Stop pushing! There's a kid here!" The words didn't fix everything, but they mattered. They traveled, not far, not perfectly, but enough. A small gap opened again, just a few inches, just a moment of relief, but Keanu used it instantly, guiding the girl forward. "Good," he said quietly. "Just like that." A woman nearby reached out, placing a hand against another person's shoulder. "Back up a little, please," she urged, her voice shaking but sincere. For the first time since the chaos began, people weren't just reacting. Some were choosing. Near the barricade, Rashid felt it too. The relentless pressure didn't disappear, but it shifted. It wasn't as sharp, as aggressive. He looked up, scanning the crowd with wide, searching eyes. "What's happening?" he muttered under his breath. Then he saw it. A subtle opening forming, not from force but from cooperation. People turning sideways, stepping back where they could, creating slivers of space where there had been none. "Keep moving back!" Rashid seized the moment, his voice louder now, more focused. "Slowly! Don't push, just move!" This time, more people listened. Not everyone, but enough to matter. Back near the stage, Alina stood frozen no longer. Her fear hadn't vanished, but something else had taken its place. Resolve. She grabbed the microphone again, her hands still trembling, and stepped forward. "Everyone, please!" she called out, her voice echoing across the silent speakers, now reconnected but stripped of music. "We need to stay calm." At first, her words dissolved into the noise, but she tried again. "Please, look around you, help each other, don't push." Her voice cracked, but it carried something real. And somewhere in the crowd, that mattered. Keanu kept moving. The edge of the densest crush was getting closer now. The air felt slightly less suffocating, the movement less violent. The girl's grip on him hadn't loosened, but her breathing had slowed just enough. "You're doing great," he told her softly. She nodded against him, too overwhelmed to speak. A sudden shove came from behind, stronger than the others. Keanu braced instantly, shifting his stance to absorb it. His arm tightened protectively around the girl as he pushed back, not aggressively, but firmly enough to stop the momentum from transferring forward. "Easy," he said again, louder this time, his tone cutting through the tension. "You're okay. No one needs to run." The man behind him blinked, disoriented, then nodded slightly. Yeah. And just like that, another spark of panic dimmed. It wasn't control, not yet, but it was something else. Something fragile, something growing. Finally, they broke through. The density of the crowd eased, the bodies around, them thinning just enough to allow real movement again. Fresh air hit the girl's face, and she gasped, her grip loosening slightly as she realized she could breathe. "We're out," Keanu said gently, guiding her a few more steps until they reached a clearer space near the side. She looked up at him for the first time, her eyes wide, still filled with fear, but also something else. Relief. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Keanu gave a small nod, his expression calm but distant, as if he hadn't fully left the chaos behind. Because he hadn't. He glanced back. The crowd was still unstable, still shifting, still dangerously close to collapsing again if something went wrong. Rashid was shouting orders, trying to regain structure. Alina's voice echoed faintly, urging calm. And in the middle of it all, the tension still lingered, like a storm that had paused, not passed. Keanu exhaled slowly. Then he made a decision. He gently guided the girl toward a nearby staff member, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Stay with Ty." For a while, no one moved, not in panic, not in urgency, just stillness. It spread slowly, like the calm after a storm that no one was sure had truly passed. The crowd, once a shifting, uncontrollable force, now stood in scattered pockets of quiet, people catching their breath, looking around as if waking from something they didn't fully understand. The lights softened. The harsh flashes faded into a steady glow that revealed faces instead of blinding them. Sweat, relief, confusion, every emotion hung openly in the air. On stage, Keanu Reeves stood with the microphone lowered at his side. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. What needed to happen had already begun. Near the barricade, Rashid finally let go of the metal rail. His hands trembled slightly as he stepped back, scanning the crowd with disbelief. Just minutes ago, it had felt impossible, like the pressure would only build until something irreversible happened. Now, people were helping each other over the barrier instead of crushing against it. "Careful, watch your step," he said, his voice calmer now as he guided a young man through. "You're okay." The man nodded, still shaken. "I thought—" He started, then stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Rashid didn't need him to. He had thought the same thing. A few meters away, Alina slowly stepped forward, her heart still racing. The stage felt different now. Quieter, heavier. She looked out at the crowd, not as an audience this time, but as people. Real people. Vulnerable. Connected in a way she had never witnessed before. Her gaze shifted and found him. Standing. There, not at the center, not under a spotlight, but slightly off to the side, like he had already begun to step away from it all. For a moment, she just stared. There was something familiar about him. Something she couldn't quite place, not because she didn't recognize his face, but because it didn't match the image in her mind. This wasn't a performance. This wasn't an act. This was something else entirely. "Hey!" she called, out her voice soft, unsure. He turned slightly. Their eyes met for a brief second. And in that moment, there was no crowd, no chaos, no noise, just a quiet understanding that passed between two people who had seen the same storm from different places. Alina opened her mouth, as if to say something more. But before she could, he gave a small nod, then stepped back. Not dramatically. Not in a way that drew attention. Just one step, then another. And just like that, he was moving away from the center. Back into the edges. Back into anonymity. In the crowd, whispers had already begun. Who was that? Was that him? I swear that looked like... Phones were coming out now. People replaying shaky videos, zooming in on blurred frames of the stage. Some clips caught the shape of his face under the flickering lights, others just captured the voice, calm, steady, unmistakable in its tone. But no one had a clear answer. Near the side, the young girl clutched the hand of the staff member, her eyes scanning desperately. "Where did he go?" she asked. The woman looked around, confused. "Who?" "The man. The one who helped?" "Me." They searched, but the space he had occupied was already filled by others moving through, clearing out, reconnecting with friends. He was gone. Backstage, a technician rushed to a monitor, pulling up recorded footage from the security feeds. "Roll that back," someone said, right before things calmed down. The screen flickered. Grainy footage appeared, angles from above, from the sides, capturing fragments of the chaos as it unfolded. And then, there he was. Entering. The frame quietly, unnoticed, moving through the crowd with purpose. No security. No announcement. Just a man stepping into a moment no one else could control. The room went silent. "Is that?" someone whispered. Another leaned closer to the screen. "It looks like him." They watched as the footage showed him reaching the stage, taking the microphone, speaking, not as a celebrity, not as a performer, but as something far simpler, human. Back outside, the festival grounds were slowly returning to life. Not the wild electric chaos from before, but something calmer, more aware. People talked in lower voices. Strangers checked. On each other. The energy hadn't disappeared. It had changed. And yet, the question lingered everywhere. Who was the man who stopped it all? Some believed they knew. Others weren't sure. But the full truth, was already slipping away, carried off into the night with the one person who had never come for recognition in the first place. And somewhere beyond the lights, beyond the noise, beyond the questions, he kept walking. Part 8 morning arrived quietly, as if the world itself was careful not to disturb what had happened the night before. The festival grounds looked different in daylight. What had once been a sea of flashing lights and chaos was now scattered with footprints, discarded cups, and the faint echoes of something unforgettable. Crews moved slowly across the field, cleaning, repairing, resetting, but there was a strange reverence in the air, like everyone knew they weren't just tidying up a venue. They were closing the chapter on something bigger. Phones buzzed everywhere. Clips from the night had already begun to spread, shaky videos, partial angles, fragments of a moment that no single camera had fully captured. A voice cutting through. Panic. A crowd slowly stilling. A figure standing on stage, barely visible under flickering lights. Speculation moved faster than certainty. Was that really him? It had to be. I don't know. The video's too blurry. News outlets picked it up, headlines forming within hours, each one trying to define something that didn't quite fit into words. Some called it luck. Others called it leadership. A few called it a miracle. But none of them told the whole story. Back at the festival site, small groups of people lingered longer than they needed to. Rashid stood near the barricade again, this time in daylight, his hands resting lightly on the metal rail that had nearly buckled under pressure just hours before. He ran his fingers across it slowly, as if grounding himself in the reality that it had held, that they had held. A colleague approached him. Crazy night, huh? Rashid let out a quiet breath. Yeah, he said, his voice thoughtful. But it shouldn't have ended the way it almost did. The colleague nodded. Still, someone stepped in. Rashid's gaze drifted toward the stage. Yeah, he said again, softer this time. Someone did. Not far from there, Alina sat on the edge of that same stage, her legs hanging. Over the side, a notebook resting in her lap. She hadn't slept. Not really. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it again. The crowd, the fear, the moment everything shifted. But more than that, she remembered the voice. Calm, steady, certain. She tapped her pen lightly against the page, then began to write. Not lyrics at first, just feelings. Fragments of what she had witnessed. The way thousands of people had gone. From strangers to something more. The way fear had been replaced, not by force, but by connection. Then slowly, the words began to take shape. A melody followed, soft at first, then stronger. The beginning of something new. At the edge of the grounds, the young girl stood with her mother, her hand tightly wrapped in hers, as if she still wasn't ready to let go. I told you, the girl said, looking up with wide, certain eyes. He was real. Her mother smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I believe you. But no one knows where he went, the girl added. Her mother glanced out at the emptying field, then back at her. Maybe that's the point. The girl frowned slightly, not fully understanding, but she didn't argue. Because deep down, she felt it too. Some things weren't meant to be explained. They were meant to be remembered. Across the world, the videos continued to spread. Clips of the moment when everything slowed, when the noise softened, when people chose to stop pushing and start helping. And in almost every version, there was that same figure, unclear, partially hidden by light and shadow, but always there, always steady. Experts tried to analyze it, commentators tried to define it, social media tried to name it. But none of them captured what it actually was. Because what happened that night wasn't about control. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't even about one person. It was about a choice. A choice that spread from one voice to thousands. A choice to pause, to breathe, to see each other. And somewhere, far from the cameras, far from the headlines, Keanu Reeves walked alone. No interviews, no statements, no claim to what had happened. Just quiet steps along an empty street. Hands in his pockets, the noise of the festival now nothing more than a distant memory. He didn't check his phone, he didn't look back. Because he already knew something the world was still trying to figure out. The moment didn't belong to him. It never did. Later that evening, a single video surfaced, clearer than the rest. Not perfect, but enough. It showed him stepping onto the stage. It caught his voice, just a few lines, simple and unpolished. Look at the person next to you. Help each other. The clip ended there. No dramatic finish, no applause, just a message. And that was the final truth. The one no headline could fully capture. In a night that almost fell apart, it wasn't power that saved thousands. It was presence. And sometimes, that's enough.